Alright, red light's on, S&S 30, and I got some extra batteries on me. I've got props, and I've got smokes. I got water, like Mom said. Drink a lot of water, and I will add to that, don't do oxy. What I'm going to talk about today is a record that I put out, oh my gosh, almost 10 years ago. And the name of this record is Tick Treatment. And I'm going to see if I can get the level good so that, ooh, let's unplug the speaker. But anyways, that's very fascinating to me. It's not playing. Maybe that's a good thing. Well, anyways, I put out a record. It took me about a year to make, called Tick Treatment. It eventually got called Tick Treatment. But like a lot of things that I've done over the years, it was a coalescence of things that seemed unrelated at first, but somehow or another mortar arrived. And a theme or some sort of connective notion or concept. Sometimes these things are visual. They spring from a picture. But what Tick Treatment did, and so much of this is hindsight, all right? I mean, you can't even imagine the flux that we were in. For about 12 years, when our son was in the United States Army Infantry, being pinged all over the place with, young grandchildren and a wife, getting dragged all over the place like you do in the military. All that uncertainty. And, Michael was deployed into combat situations in the Middle East 4 times. That's probably about 6 years, all things considered. The getting there, the being there, and the getting back from there. 4 times. And while I was beyond my dalliance with painkiller addiction, for a while, I was still drinking too much. Rely on the coping skills kind of thing. Very bad advice. And like I do, and I've really only realized this recently, that all of these media that, are at hand for the longest time, I've got the last 40 years of it here, most of it. But I know that if I could dig through the stuff that my mother has in boxes somewhere, I could be finding evidence of something I made in order to try to process something I was thinking about all the way back to about 1961. Because I'm remembering my first documented improvisation. My wonderful mom, who I spent what time I spent in the house with. I was kind of a free range kid, so I spent a lot of time outdoors unsupervised. No prison could hold him. I escaped from a harness apparatus that was popular to keep kids on the property. It's like putting a dog on a runner. I escaped from one of those when I was around 2 and made it down a highway to a McDonald's on foot. And my dad saw me walking home with a handful of drinking straws. He stopped. He picked me up and brought me home and let Mom know how he felt about that. But somewhere around then, and I think my mom showed it to me when I was about 5, a couple years later, that she'd hung on to this thing. And she'd been teaching me how to use kid scissors, the ones that aren't pointy. Mom taught me everything you learn in early childhood education, daycare, preschool, kindergarten, and part of first grade by the time I was 4. She taught me to read. She taught me to count. She taught me to add and subtract. She gave me access to these huge books that we had that were, I think most of them were published by Time Life Books. And they were about the eras of the world and the development of human thought and technology and art and stuff. She didn't explain it to me like this. She just said, "Here, you might like this book." And I did. Here I am, 66 years old. I'm about 3 or 4 years into really deep study about foundation eras on this planet and how cities are built on the remnants of cities. And little did I know that I had a frame of reference that my mother gave me by letting me see pictures of art that depicted castles that are no longer there. And, Mom pulled out this thing one time. She said, "You made this when you were 2. It's a bird and the wings work." I looked at it and it looked like a mess. It was 2 pieces of yellow construction paper that had been it looked haphazardly chopped out of one larger page. And in the same way that, like, if you've ever, when you were a kid, bought a balsa wood glider, they come in this plastic flat pack, and you cut the end off it and pull out all the parts, and the wing typically goes through the fuselage part of it. Well, this bird that I made out of yellow construction paper was kind of like a caveman version of that concept. It's about this big. What a gift, to have a parent that would nurture you to improvise and then applaud you. Not just with their words, but by keeping the thing and showing it to you later. when she was still watching you develop as a maker, a creator of things, a creator of circumstances, a creator of sentences, a creator of solutions based on calculations. That was the beginning of my improvising, as far as I know. I thanked my mother for this. The last time we were able to have a conversation before she went completely into the fog, about a year and a half ago. She knows. She knows I love her so much. And so, fast forward to, 2015 or so. And all of a sudden, this strange coalescence occurs. And it has been the case during a couple of creative seasons with music. I've had really, really good fortune in getting positive responses from people, some of whom I know or knew, and some of whom it's a cold call from a stranger. But I'd reach out to somebody because, we live in the internet age and people are entirely trackable, mostly. You can find people. Sometimes people find you. Sometimes you are in some internet realm where you notice that a musician whose work you're familiar with is commenting in the same thread as you because you know someone mutually. There's all kinds of ways that people eventually establish contact. But as far as improvisation is concerned, it's my favorite thing to do, regardless of the media. Okay? Marshall McLuhan said, "The medium is the message." I remember reading his books. McLuhan, Paolo Soleri, the amazing, artful geologist / architect. William Burroughs, whose work can be helpful in addiction ministry, right? And because sometimes you're dealing with broken people who are artists, like me. And so anyways, back around 2014, 2015, we'd finished bothering with and wasting one more second going out and doing these several year-long taste tests at different Sunday morning entertainment systems around this town within about a 4-mile radius of our home. And they were all fails. As a teacher, I would ask them to rewrite their paper and base it on the Bible this time. Those doctrines were a mess. And we got out, and it's because, I didn't want to be tarred with the same brush that people who are really politically charged about stuff and make, decisions about who they will or will not associate just based on who you're associating with. And I get that we'll be judged by the company we keep, but that presumes that we know all of the people who are where we are, which is bullshit, okay? The last place you're going to get to know a person and their truth is in a church. And once we realized that those weren't the kind of neighbors that the Bible was really talking about loving on, right? Those are the kind of people that all the letters of Paul, the epistles and all that stuff in the New Testament, as well as what the prophets said was going to happen, that's where the mess is. That's the wide path that leads to destruction. That is a branch, that is the Bible-y branch of the other church. The one that doesn't fear God, the one that hence has no wisdom, and because of that, they're destroyed for lack of knowledge, right? And I always have to say that believe whatever you want to believe. Pascal's wager. I'm sort of plagued by logic and reason, because of the way I was raised and schooled. I don't want to use the expression reared. It didn't go that far. I did get my tail tore up some. But Pascal's wager is a fabulous challenge that I would present to anyone who's sort of in the other church, they don't believe this as I do. As I have come to. For most of my life, I didn't. I was just like everybody else. Almost everybody else thinks that's a bunch of malarkey as soon as it tells them, no, stop, don't do the thing you're enjoying. But I'd reached a point where I was willing to, accept guidance, be mentored all day by that. And we got out of church. We took the time that we had been putting into these brands, these Sunday morning entertainments for most people, and gave that time back to actual study, like Bereans are supposed to do. Know your context, know your history, know your languages, know the signs of false preaching and false doctrine and stuff. Be a Berean. Or like Conan the Barbarian, if you wish, be a hyper-Berean. Almost a superhero kind of person. Here comes trouble. This is Big Boy. He inherited us, and I think he wants to go where the dish is and would have knocked over the camera. He's a good boy, though. Get over there. Don't touch my camera. So there I am, my wife and I. Doggone it, you stop it. Quit sniffing that camera. You're just full of trouble. You're going to make this into an adventure movie, an action movie with your big body. Don't. Just don't. Thank you. Lord have mercy. We got 4 cats and 1 dog. All of them rescue animals. Every one of them full-on improvisers all day long. With headphones on. They're not listening. So anyways, there I am in this sort of new season where I am no longer involving myself with music worship ministry in any kind of an organized setting. And I'd been doing it for a really long time at that point, right? I'd been doing things with groups of other musical believers at Growing Oaks, Reidsville United Methodist, Spray Baptist, Osborne Baptist, Early Ave Baptist, The Fellowship in Reidsville, and whenever asked to just come out and do something somewhere on for the Easter service or something for a long, long time. But that hasn't happened in a long, long time because another season came in, and it was this season. And this next season was a loop back in some ways to the 1980s, late 70s and 80s, during the DIY independent publishing and music production period that my dear friend Jerry Kranitz in Ohio wrote a book all about. And some people call that period the cassette culture, some call it the 80s DIY movement. A lot of indie record labels jumped up, and on a much more humble and labor intensive level, people like me were making records and manufacturing cassette records and stuff at home and doing all of the mail order and marketing and, you know, promotion and all that kind of stuff. And during those years, I collaborated with a whole lot of people, right? In the same way that I never turned down a paying job that's legal, you know, that pops my way, you know, chances are I'm going to need that bump. When someone says to me, hey, can you contribute a track for this thing that I'm doing? I go, sure, what do you want? And the golden rule says, you know, treat other people the way you hope they'd treat you. And I found that to be a pretty good modus operandi for most of my life, even before I was saved. You know, just treat people decent. And the likelihood of a positive outcome is, naturally, it's accentuated. So I did a lot of collaboration with strangers during the 80s when I was in the service, and I didn't have, the mailbox was my closest place to everybody because of, the itinerant nature of being in the military. And I established a mess of contacts in the 80s with people that were cassette artists, right? And, every now and again we'd get asked to contribute a track to something that was a little more big, right? A compilation of some sort, a tribute album to such and such a influential artist, or something like that. And back during those years, I had already been listening to a band that I really, really dug called Dr. Nerve. And Dr. Nerve, for me, was one of the 5 or 6 most intelligent and engaging prog bands. I grew up on prog. Genesis, Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, all that mess. Oregon, with Ralph Towner and those guys. I thought of all of that as prog. ECM records, a lot of it felt like prog to me. Windham Hill sounded like sleepy prog to me, Some of Windham Hill sort of sounds like Jethro Tull acoustic music, by my math, by my reckoning. So Dr. Nerve, this band that my friend Nick Didkovsky put together on the heels of, and I think as a sort of an outcropping of musical ideas that he had developed by himself or in small group settings over a period of time, because he has a way of composing that is unlike anybody. And I like it. It's great. Sounds good. Really incredible musicianship in this group too, and a astonishing consistency of membership over 40 years. A lot of the original people are still in that band and doing stuff together. They're great. Check them out. And another band that was on the same label at the same time that I liked was another American prog band, a quartet called the Muffins. And in that group, the leader was a fella named Dave Newhouse. And not only was he really awesome keyboard player, but he played about any kind of wind instrument, from a harmonica to a baritone saxophone, and everything in between. And I really liked the Muffins. Well, actually, there were 3 Muffin records. They probably got about 10 or 15 records. There were 2 or 3 records that really, they were go back to records. Like a lot of the music I've got in there, I might as well just give it to Goodwill, because I don't listen to anything anymore, except in my truck, right? And right now, Blonde on Blonde is stuck in the CD player and won't eject. So I'm back to listening to the radio again. I don't listen to CDs. I don't go back and listen to my own work that much. I'm not listening to Tick Treatment right now. It won't let me. Something is fooling around with its ability to play audio at this moment. How interesting that is. But anyway, so in the 80s, lots of collaboration with strangers, a lot of connections made with various people. They remained in my address book, and I go through all these changes and stuff, and lo and behold, I'm out of the Navy, and I'm moved down here to North Carolina. I don't know anybody. I feel like, once again, it's time to start reaching out to do recordings with people that are interested in doing such a thing. And so I start using email to communicate with some of the old friends I had, and journalists and radio people from the 80s around 2000, 1999, 2000. And as happened the previous time, I end up meeting more people. And then along comes Facebook. And I'm like, I remember, I thought Facebook was stupid. My first impression was, this is stupid. You're going to regret this. And it was a really weird learning curve that changed the semantics of the word friend forever. Why? Because with the simple prefix un, friend, you add un to it, and to a species that collectively, regardless of language, culture, and religion, has very similar ideas about what a friend is. To give people an opportunity to click a little graphic and communicate to someone else, they weren't your friend anymore. Without explanation, without speech, eye contact, that hurt a lot of people. It hurt me, and I hurt people with it. I didn't know what I was using, right? People say, watch out for AI. Something could go sideways. Well, nobody said watch out for the unlike button, the unfriend button. You're not my friend now. Watch out for those. They're going to make people crazy. People are going to realize that they were suckers and allowed someone to put a decal with the word friend on probably misspelled I before E on your forehead with their picture on it. And they're going to be looking at you every single day to make sure that that decal can be seen by them and the world on you. I still don't really understand what happened. LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat, all these damn ways to say, look at me. Look what I'm doing. Hey, you want to do such and such? Tinder. And around 2000, I began this series called the Improvised Duets series. Actually, that's what I called it later. At first, I was just reaching out to people that I missed up in New England who I'd been, doing all kinds of stuff, music, art, whatever. And I was 4 or 5 states away from them now, at least. I think it's 4, the shortest route. And I'm bored as can be. I'm as bored as a person with 2 teenagers and an infant, recently married, can be. I guess I was starved for connection. And I was blessed then, right around 2001, when my leg was broken. God, Lord. Here comes Oxy. I was blessed with cold calls that got yeses from strangers, really interesting musicians, right? People like Ken Hyder from the band Talisker, which is this folk music based progressive band that no one I know has ever heard of them. So I tell them about it. Talisker is a type of indigenous alcoholic beverage in that part of the world, Great Britain. And Ken Hyder is a drummer and a percussionist and a Tuvan throat singer who led that band. And he did a lot of work with Tim Hodgkinson from Henry Cow together in a duet that I think they called K-Scope. They traveled all the way to Mongolia to learn how the shamans do what they do, and then brought it home, and that got into their music. I so dig that. Ken Hyder agreed to do a record with me. Unbelievable. I still love it. There's a track on it called Haunted House that is just so good. People that don't know what Tuvan throat singing is will think there's a synthesizer player on it. It's him. And other people too. And around that time, around that time I had done a compilation of guitar-based solo recordings by a bunch of people to try to replace the basketball hoops and backboards and stuff at the school where I was teaching. They were all tore up. And a bunch of good work came in from all over the place. We got some Fred Frith, we got some Nick Didkovsky, we got, there's some people that have died. Ben Waters, otherwise known as Ben Horrendous. A bunch of people that were involved in a Captain Beefheart discussion group that was called the Fire Party. Contributed work. It was awesome. It just boomed, it worked. Things with good motives get blessed. I'll say that again and again. When you're working on something that's good, good helps you do it. Good, G, big G. Forget the great architect. I'm talking about the bigger good. Good for everybody. And my friend Scotty Irving that I've had a few musical seasons with, he's a percussionist, and he, for many years, 20 plus years, he toured around doing a solo performance piece that was always different every time he did it, called Clang Quartet. And it was the way that he expressed his Christian faith. And he, oh my gosh, just with props and electronics and masks and costumes and things that he made and all kinds of kinetic energy and loudness, he carried his audiences through the stations of the cross, the scourging and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And it was, you can look this guy up. Holy cow. Yeah, if you worship the holy cow, watch Scotty Irving and you'll probably change. You'll probably think twice about it. Scotty told me that, as he has done on a couple of occasions, I love him for this, he'd say, hey man, there's this compilation record or a tribute record out. Here's the contact info. I'll bet you that they'd accept something of yours. And I think I'd already contributed an electric mandolin version of Pipeline to a 50s surf and instrumental music tribute record. And Scotty told me about one called A Tribute to Alice. And they were accepting submissions of covers of Alice Cooper songs, which took me back to about 1970-71 at Ed Kimbrell's house, because he had, I think he had $1 Billion Babies, and I know he had the record that had Schools Out on it. And I always liked the song I'm 18. Oh Lord, here comes the big cat again. Don't do it. Let's see if you can get around there. Don't mess my camera up. Oh, doggone it. You're about to kill it. Nice try. There we go. All right. Thank you, big boy. And I had Nick Dudkovsky's email because he'd been one of the people that contributed to the Delicate Furies guitar compilation. Oh, and I should mention that Fred Frith, the track that he contributed to that way back in 1999, I noticed that it recently has appeared on kind of a mop disc that he put out of a bunch of stuff that never got on a record. And the piece is called Yui's Workout, and I was tickled to see that he's got that on his own record now. That's just super. But anyways, I reached out to Nick Dudkovsky in an email about this Alice Cooper tribute record because, man, I do hate leaf blowers. Because he's real fond of Alice Cooper. It goes beyond fond. He's played with band members. He's, he set up a thing where he got a band together of top shelf musicians and does the whole Pretties for You record. This was a number of years ago. Pretties for You was the record that Frank Zappa produced that doesn't sound like any other Alice Cooper record. It's almost prog. Okay? It's accidental prog. It's a great record. I reached out to Nick. I said, hey man, you want to collaborate on a version of I'm 18 with me for this thing? And he said, sure. I'll send you a track. And he did. The track that he sent me was a discussion he had with a kid in his neighborhood, a high school kid. Oh, here comes my cat again. I'm going to punch you in the face. Get down there. On the subject of the anti-hero, right? And it's brief, a couple minutes, like a elevator conversation type thing. And Nick's talking about Alice Cooper being an anti-hero when he was young. And the young man that he's talking to is talking about a comic book character. I don't remember whether it was Crow or Spawn. It was from that era in comics. And the young man was talking about his idea of what an anti-hero was. That's what Nick sent me. There was no music. And it was awesome, right? I'm 18. Deep concept stuff. Well, little did he know that I was working on continuing to use this solid body oak mandolin that I had. It had a pickup on it the size of a Pop-Tart. I gave that to Dennis James, the bass player, a few years back. I'd recorded an instrumental version of the song I'm 18 on that instrument. And those two things mixed together became our submission. I'm not kidding you. I very truly thought they might decline it. It was so strange. Nope, it ended up on the record. And that was cool. And to this day, I regret not getting the name of that young man that Nick was talking to in the documentation for the track. I dropped the ball. How could I not have remembered to get that in there? I'm sorry, dude. You know you did it. And around the same time, I was also starting to re-engage with these cassette artists from the 80s. Oh, for heaven's sakes, now I got the damn lawnmower going. I'm going to take this somewhere else.